Welcome to section 6. You are almost done with this Storycraft workshop, so we are really excited. At the end of this section, you are going to be writing your own story. And so this is a big deal, and so we're really excited about it. So in this section, what we're going to do is we're not going to dump a bunch of new information on you. Instead, we're going to talk about the writing process and some things that might help you when you go to write this story, to help you kind of avoid some pitfalls, some problems in just actually doing the hard work of writing the story down, getting it on paper so that you can share it. It actually can be a process. And so there are whole books and things written about the writing process, but we're going to give you some tips, some pointers, some things to consider. So before you start writing your story, first consider when you're going to do your writing. Consider when. Some people work best to write early in the morning before the day gets going, before their brain is tired. Other people really thrive in the middle of the night for some reason. They want to write at 10, 11, midnight, and that's when they do their writing. Other people can do it in the afternoon, but whatever the case, find the time that works best for you. Usually it's going to be a time where you can get away from as many distractions as possible, where you can let your brain kind of go and focus on the story and just really work on the writing part. And if you have a lot of distractions around you, that can be really difficult. So writing on a lunch break or something like that might not be the best when you're trying to eat and whatever it happens to be. So finding the time of when you write is actually really important. And once you pick a time and it's working for you, try to do it at the same time every time you sit down to write. It really helps your brain get into the creative process of saying, all right, at this time, my brain goes here. And the more you do it, the better your brain is at focusing faster and getting more accomplished as you're writing your story. So really pick a time and then try to write. Sometimes writing right after lunchtime, not the best. So think about it, find the time that works best for you. Then let's talk about the environment that you write. Now, the environment can actually be really important. Some people need to get away completely by themselves, off in a room. When we filmed John Erickson from Hank the Cowdog, he has his own little office. It's not even attached to his house. It is a little quarter-mile walk around the way to a little office that he has on his ranch. And that's where he goes and he does all his writing there. So the environment can be really important if you want to be an accomplished writer, if you want to get a lot done. You need to find a place where you can go and your brain can focus. And so sometimes this can be your bedroom. Other times, somebody's bedroom might not work. Maybe it's too messy. Maybe there's too many distractions. You got to figure out where you need to be to write the story. So as soon as you find a place where your brain is focused and you're getting a lot accomplished and you've been there an hour and it doesn't feel like it, then that might be a good environment for you. So find the environment, time and environment, and when to write. That will be really helpful for you. And then let's talk about your first draft. Your first draft. Now, this is where we get to the difficult stuff when you're writing. First drafts are almost always not very good. I hate to say it, it's very rare when you stumble upon somebody who writes a first draft and it is just amazing. And from personal experience, my first drafts are usually my more trash drafts. They're the things that you just want to get it down and then it's down, but it's not polished, it's not pretty yet, it's not solid yet, and you have to keep working at it. So when you write, you need to write your first draft, and then you got to do the painstaking process of getting some feedback. So when you do your first draft, you want to take it and find somebody, look at this board, somebody who will do and provide you with feedback. Now, usually this can be a friend or a family member. Try to find somebody who likes to read, somebody that can really give you a heads up on how well they're doing, if they're relating to the story. And feedback, let's be honest, sometimes it can be difficult to get feedback because you don't want to give it to somebody who's just going to say, oh, wow, it was so awesome. That's the amazing thing. Oh, my goodness, it was so fantastic. Because even if it's good, you don't want somebody who's just going to tell you, oh, it's good. You want somebody who can look at it critically and kind of give you some feedback on, hey, I like it, but this stuff, it could be better, and this stuff could be better, and this part might have been confusing. And so you want to find somebody who will give you some real feedback. And just a word of encouragement, whenever you write something, it can be very vulnerable to give your work to somebody, to have somebody look at it and give you feedback. It can be very kind of scary. It can even be hurtful when they find out, oh my gosh, they didn't like it as much as I thought that they would. And you know what? That is okay. We do not want you to get discouraged by that. That's part of the writing process. And as you get to be a better and better writer, you'll find out that the more feedback that you get is usually better. It helps you become a better writer. And so even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's not very much fun to hear that something didn't work the way you thought it would, feedback is critical. And so you need to kind of do what you have to do to get over that. But don't get discouraged. Allow any of that critique to help make you a better writer. So find somebody, a trusted friend, a family member, somebody who can give you this kind of feedback, especially when you complete your first draft. Then another thing we want you to encourage you to do is what we call let it sit. Let it sit. So you have your first draft, you've gotten some feedback, but don't just immediately say, all right, fine, and you take off to go write it. Don't do it. Let it sit. Give it a few days. Allow it to kind of take the work that you worked on, set it aside, and go do something else. Play sports, go to other activities. Let your brain leave it and give yourself a little mini vacation from your story. And that way, after enough time has gone by, you can pick it back up, start looking at it, and come at it with some fresh eyes. It's really good to let it sit. It gives your brain time to come to a critical understanding of what you've written. You can look at it, you'll see holes that you didn't see the first time. But if you just completely allow yourself to get consumed in the story, you're not going to be able to see those things. So give it some time, let it sit after you do your first draft and you get your feedback, make some notes, and then let it sit. And then come back at it and be objective about it. You can look at it and say, all right, I think I know what I need to do to fix the story. So let it sit. Let's talk about draft 2. Second draft. Now, just like the first draft, we want to encourage you with your second draft. Feedback is always good, especially if you fix some things that you got from the first time you got feedback. If they said, hey, try to fix these things, and so your second draft, you fixed them, it's great to go back to the same person and get that feedback from them. It really helps you kind of figure out, okay, yeah, it's really working. That was a good idea, and now it's good. At this point, you might want to do some final tweaking after you get some feedback. But this is basic storycraft. So our goal is to get you to finish the story. So after you reach the second draft, you might want to tweak it a few times, but then kind of wrap it up. Don't do third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh drafts, because your goal here is just to come up with a solid story. It does not have to be an award-winning story right off the bat. We just want you to tell a good story. And so after draft 2, you're going to look at it and make a few decisions after the second draft, and then you're going to wrap it up. First, can you shorten it? Is there anything in there that needs to come out of there? Is there anything in there that really isn't necessary? And if there is, make sure you've gotten rid of that. You should be able to go every paragraph of your story and say, here's why this paragraph is important. Here is why it is in here, and no, it cannot be taken out. And if you find any paragraphs that are like that, go ahead and shorten it, just take it out. Another thing that you want to do is there anything in there that you might be able to word better? Perhaps you've used a word multiple times, and so there's a better adjective that you might use. Or is there any way that you can say the same thing, but maybe say it a little more clearly, or maybe better than it was before? So go through each paragraph and say, is there anything that I might be able to word better, or where I can simplify it? Anything where I'm just kind of droning on and on and on about something, maybe I can just simplify it, cut off half that sentence, that kind of thing. If there's any way that you can shorten it, it probably is best to do so. So try to shorten that down, tighten it down. I call it like bolts, where you tighten the thing down. It kind of starts off loose, and the more you compress the story and you kind of get the fat out of it, then it becomes thin and mean, and it's a good story. So that's really what that is. So shorten it if you can be, cut it if it can be cut. And then the next thing is look at one last bit about the conflict. And this is one of my favorite things to do, is I look at the conflict and I say, all right, the conflict is there. It looks pretty bad. It looks pretty dark. Is there any way I can make this even worse, even more difficult? Is there any way I can amplify the conflict? And if you look at it and you think, oh, well, here's a really rough situation. There's conflict going on, but I can add this into it, and now it's even worse. It's always best to look for that kind of thing and say, oh wait, can I make this conflict any more difficult, any more harder to overcome? Because if you can, it will add extra tension and make your story that much more interesting to read, and other people to be like, wow, this is really good. It's very intense, that kind of thing. So look at it and say, all right, can I shorten this? But then, can I make any of the conflict even worse? And if you can, do it. It will make your story that much better. And then now let's talk a little bit just about word counts. you're going to be writing a short story here, and we're going to talk about that at the section project. But as you write and as you do more and more writing, word count becomes a big deal, because depending on how many words it takes to tell your story will determine what kind of story it is. So I'm going to give you a few of those just for your own information, and that way as you work on more stories after this class, you can kind of keep these things in mind. First, if your story is more than 40,000 words, well, you've written a good-sized novel. And so most of the time, if you go to Barnes & Noble and you see novels on the shelves, they're going to be around 40,000 words. I mean, that's a pretty well-intense, very thought-through, long story. So there's your novel. And then when your word count is between 17,000 and 40,000 words, then you've got what we would call a novella. It's not quite a novel, but it's definitely bigger than a short story for sure. And so it's just a step down from that. And so that's where those things are. A novelette is a slightly shorter story even than that. It will land between 7,500 words and 17,000 words. And then finally we get to what we call the short story. And most children's books and other things are going to land in the short story kind of zone. And that's where your story is going to be at the end of this thing. It's going to be under 7,500 words. Because after that, you've written a little bit more and a little bit more. And the more word count that you have, the bigger the story is. And so more and more is expected of the story. So for you, we're trying to keep things simple and easy. And so remember, short stories need to be 7,500 words or less. And so before we close, let's talk about getting all the way through it. Believe it or not, as a writer, one of the most difficult things to do is to just finish a story. A lot of times you'll have a writer that'll start really strong, and you'll get going, you'll get through the inciting incident, and then somewhere along the middle, maybe Act 2, you're going to hit just a writer's block where you just don't know where to go next. You just can't figure it out. You kind of think you know how it ends. You've story mapped it, but somehow you reach this spot in the middle, and it's just this cursed part of the story is that middle of Act 2 kind of that zone. And so what we want to encourage you to do is the most difficult thing to do, which is get through it. You've got to get through it, keep going no matter what. And so one of the best ways to do that is to just sit down, you're blocked, and just start typing anything. Whatever comes to mind, just start typing it. Usually the way I look at it is that there's something in there, it's in a cloud in your brain, and you just got to get it out. But the only way to get it out is to just start typing something. And the more you type and the more you get going in the story, eventually the clouds will go away. You'll see what you need to do, and then it'll just land on your lap, and then you'll be able to finish. And so it's been very common for me myself and for many other writers. When you write a story, the hardest thing is just to get through it. You're going to reach that middle zone and have a problem. So if you are one of those people that reaches that point and then you don't know what to do, don't worry. Just sit down, start writing anything, and then as the story comes to you, you can go back and fix whatever you need to fix, but just keep going. You can't stop. If you stop, you'll never get it done. And then when you have a writer's block, don't let it discourage you. Take a break, go get a drink, take a walk, whatever you have to do, and then say, all right, I can finish this. You can do it. We have complete confidence in you. So just sit down and finish the story. And then when you're done, rejoice. Show it to your friends. You've now accomplished the story. You're an author. You are a writer. Congratulations. And so we really look forward to reading what you've done and just applauding you for getting through it. So we want to thank you for taking this workshop. We really hope it's helped you kind of get your mind around the basic elements of story and structure. And so we hope that you continue to use these things, that you don't forget these things. They are pretty core elements. And so we want to encourage you, keep writing, keep doing what you do. Your story matters, so get it out there. So thank you. And now let's talk about your section project.